my first answer is going to be that I would immediately eliminate student debt, because as president, you could do that with literally the signature of a pen. That would immediately ease the burden on so many Americans. The next thing is, and I know that we've talked about this, we've been Medicare for All advocates. My man showed up and he was on the cover of the Orlando Sentinel on July 25th, 2021, JB, for being at the March for Medicare for All and showing up in Orlando. It would be enacting 1881A and giving everyone in the country Medicare for All. Okay, as president, I could potentially do that. And nobody really wants to talk about that. I would certainly do it right now for the people in East Palestine. I would do it for the people in Lahaina in Maui. These people are going to need a lot more than just health care. Let's ease that burden, because that's what we do for our country. All right.
He is the founder of Indie Left Media and co-founder in the Indie News Network, executive producer for Tara Reid Show, co-host of the INN, author of multiple articles, editor, live stream engineer, publisher, commentator. Welcome to Indie Left. Good to see you.
Ooh, JB, I'm so honored just to be on this channel. I love you, man. Thanks for inviting me on.
Yeah. So one of the things that I wanted to introduce is that a lot of times people who may tune in, they'll hear me shout you and INN out from time to time. This is the man behind the plan as far as not only just the Indie News Network, but also really amplifying a lot of our content throughout various different independent news media outlets. So I just, first of all, want to thank you for the hard work that you do, as well as the team that you've built on INN.
Again, thanks so much. It's been a hell of a growth. I was a guy sitting in chat and watching streams and a fan of independent media, but mostly because I realized that corporate media was lying to us. And after watching some independent media, I was like, I think I can do this. I have the equipment and have some opinions. So I started, first I was just aggregating independent news, where I'm sharing. At first, Jesus, we can go all the way back. It was like all the shitlib stuff that we now make fun of, but that's where we all started, right? Was within Bernie land, sharing the TYTs and the Kyles and we don't do that anymore. But that was our origins, was in aggregating a bunch of independent news, realizing that they weren't actually really telling the truth either, were they? So let's find who's actually telling the truth, who's actually giving the stories from the perspective of workers, from the perspective of the people in the field, from the perspective of anti-capitalists, and from the perspective of anti-imperialists. So we started covering that, and it changed our whole focus. And we went from progressive news daily to independent left media. And then after about a year and a half, started doing a show. Like, hey, I noticed that there was some stuff that wasn't being covered. So on my own channel, I started doing a show with Reef, my buddy Reef, called How Do We Miss That? Because, hey, how did we miss that at the end of the week? There's so many stories, so much flies at us. That was the whole idea behind the show. And then after that, we'd watch crazy cat videos and weed videos and funny stuff for about an hour. And, just like eye bleach to get rid of all the crap that we have to deal with all week.
Yeah.
And then what we saw, and alongside of that, we saw you guys building it at that time, Fred Hampton Leftists, okay, growing as a network and coming together as independents to build something. And I said, there's a bunch of other independents out here that we can do something similar, inspired by what you guys did and by what Nico and MCSC did as well. Those were two of the largest inspirations for us coming together. So I reached out to a bunch of these independents and let's build a network. Let's share resources and let's share each other's stuff and go on as guests on each other's shows and collaborate. So that's, again, I appreciate the opportunity to kind of share and tell people about it, because so we've been doing this. That's about 2 years, almost 2 years. Indie News Network's been around, and I love it. I love it every day.
Definitely. You started already going into some of the origins of how you got into this, but can you dive just a little bit deeper into your origins, especially from where you were back in the day to where you are now politically, and how did you get actually into the independent media space? If you can give us just a little bit more detail regarding that, because I think a lot of times, a lot of us go into that, in this space, and a lot of us have that similar origin story. But was it different from you, or is it the same?
Well, again, I started out as a fan. I started out as somebody who was in the chats and moderating a lot of the chats for channels, helping them out, just kind of observing and listening to what everybody was saying. But really, it started out, my evolution was, I was a Bernie guy. Originally, I was, kind of an MSNBC shitlib for a long time. Bernie radicalized me away from the corporate media side to realize, and he kind of opened my eyes to how they were lying about his campaign, which opened my eyes to the fact that they were lying about not just that, but a lot of other things. Look, I was an Obama simp, and I'll admit that. And I was just kind of unplugged and comfortable until I awakened, and it lit a fire under me. So 2020, Bernie gets knifed. I got super excited for 2020 campaign. I thought that Bernie was actually going to be the fighter that we wanted him to be, and it turns out that he wasn't. But at the time, we didn't know that. So I started saying, all these different channels that I watch, nobody's really aggregating all of this into one central place, which is why I started a newsletter. I really didn't see anybody out there doing it for a long time. Then I saw Bernie get knifed in October, in March, and that's when, about a month later, I'll give a shout out, Richard Medhurst, and I know you've had him on. Shout out to my brother Richard Medhurst. Yeah. He did a stream, and he put up a clip on Twitter. I'll never forget it. It was about the middle of April. It was right after Bernie conceded, and at the end of it, he claps his hands and he goes, "Wake up, asshole!" And
I remember that.
Bro, yeah. It literally snapped me awake, and I started going to his live streams. That night, I went into his Discord, and I actually got to talk to him in face to face in like a voice chat in a Discord with a bunch of people. It was awesome. We were on for hours.
Yeah,
and I knew there was something special there, and I started to connect with some of the people in this community, and I realized immediately. Now, remember, this was during lockdown. This is during pandemic. I'd never been on Discord before. And all of a sudden, I found community of like-minded people that I could get on a chat with and that I could talk with all day long, voice chat, video chat. It was incredible. Yeah. I think Discord was kind of part of my evolution, which was, how do I aggregate independent news and use Discord as a tool to do that? So I figured out how to do that. And that, again, opened me up to meeting Reef, because Reef started the Jimmy Dore Discord unofficially years ago.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, how about that? So that's originally how I met Reef. Was I went into the Jimmy Dore Discord, and he and I were just kind of communicating, and then we got connected through another network that put us kind of together on a project called the U.S. Solutions Summit back in 2021. And but at that point, I had already kind of dropped. Now, the other thing that big radicalized me. So Bernie was a big focal point. The other one was Julian Assange trial in September of 2020. All right, during the presidential campaign, during September, and it was Richard Medhurst, who was in the Old Bailey every single day. Yeah. He was in there, and then every day he'd come out and he'd do a live stream and he'd report on it. And I was still a fan of TYT at the time. I was begging them to cover this, and they just wouldn't. And it told me that even progressive media, there was a line that they wouldn't cross. There was something that they wouldn't cover. Yep. And this was the most important press freedom case of all time. How could they completely ignore it? And I was done with them after that. And then came Force the Vote, which was just a further defining moment about who was on our side and who wasn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, I remember all these things that you're actually talking about, which is very interesting. And it's very enlightening, because the thing is that, especially with the Richard Medhurst going to the trials for Julian Assange, I remember those as well, and how hard he was going for Julian Assange. And part of me was like, why is this guy going so hard for Julian Assange? I really didn't know that much about it until Misty. And then she enlightened me every which way, which I am deeply grateful for. But once she started talking about it, then that's when light bulb went off. And It's the exact same thing regarding TYT and all these other, what I like to call the legacy left outlets, where they were saying that the system is corrupt, but we got to change it from the inside. And from what I've gathered, especially as somebody that's part of a marginalized community, is you cannot change a burning building from the inside. You can't put the fire out from the inside. You have to go outside the building that's on fire, and you have to start putting the fire out from the outside. Because if you try to do it from the inside, you're just going to get burned. And so that's one of the things that I realized, especially from watching a lot, that we're really just rah Democratic Party, just make sure they're not corporate, when in reality that's kind of an oxymoron, because the entire duopoly itself is corporate anyway. So yeah.
Well, and this whole trying to portray this Democrats are slightly less awful than Republicans, it doesn't really matter. What we need to do is tear down the whole structure and go against both of them, because they are equally monstrous. And there are a lot of ways that the Democrats are kind of worse than Republicans, and they don't want to own up to that side. They just completely ignore it, and it's 100% focused on Republicans. And I saw that during the 2020 campaign, that it was wall-to-wall Trump from a lot of these folks, and some of them still are covering Trump 24/7 for the last 3 years, and their channels have been tremendously inflated as a result. They've gotten rewarded by the algorithm. They've gotten rewarded from the shitlib community, the PMC class that has been fear-mongered against the fascism from the right, while they allow the fascism on the left and are quiet and silent about sending $150 billion to Ukraine, for example, about warmongering against China. There's, you know, what's going on with it, being silent about what's happening in Israel and in Gaza and West Bank. There's so many hypocrisies happening there, where they're willing to ignore half the problem because it gets rid of the half that really makes them uncomfortable.
Of course.
The whole thing should make them uncomfortable.
Definitely. That's a really good point. You just drifted into my next question, which is perfect. Thank you so very much. What's your opinions on the direction of the left? Do you think it's a healthy and or necessary progression, or do you think it's divisive and stifling?
Well, I think that I've seen both sides of it, and there's a lot of ugliness and divisiveness, and there is definitely some wreckers and some personalities that are out there that are inflammatory, that are looking to start fights. But at the same time, look at what Rome is doing, building a library and doing mutual aid.
Yeah.
The term mutual aid really had not been part of the independent media vernacular until FHL RBN had started doing it and living it and showing people this is what we do for our communities. And this is what you can be doing and should be doing all the time. And it's been inspiring to so many people. And I think that staying local and realizing that at a federal level, because of the influence of big money in politics and the fact that we're all poor on the left and have no money, where can we have the most influence and the most reach and do the most, which is to help the people around us, the person next to you, with mutual aid primarily, but also by working together to have a conversation, come together and build structures together that go against what's happening right now, that tear that down. You know, yeah. I think I do see both sides. I also am not necessarily, labels are bad, as my brother Reef always says. Stay independent, and I though left is kind of in the name, I've kind of been moving away from what the word left. And I know Chris Legion wrote an article famously about why I left the left. I don't even like the label. I'm to the left of the Democratic Party, if you consider whatever left is versus right. That's all just a mental structure anyway. But I have some thoughts that are somewhat conservative. I'm a father of young daughters, so I have certain feelings about the way that I want to see them protected. Now, but I'm also, you know, highly liberal, which is also called left. And why is liberal called left, conservative, right? There's all kinds of philosophical questions that go much deeper there that you've gone into with Dr. West that I absolutely love. And, you know, that's a whole other story that's been happening right now. Again, division around certain personalities versus coming together on issues. When we talk about the certain issues that all unite us, which is what most of the stuff is, we great things happen. I mean,
Yeah.
look at what's happening around Lahaina and around what the left and what the independent media community has done to try to help the residents of Lahaina when nobody else really has. And everything else has been about a corporate cash grab and about the World Economic Forum's 10-minute, 15-minute cities and all the other things. And they're ignoring, how do we help the people get their lives back? How do we help the people get their homes back? And shout out to my brother Pasta for flying out there to get the real story and to get some real footage and to tell you what's happening. Because, you know, I think that there's an important part of independent media. It's not perfect. There's parts of it that are ugly. And also there's infiltration and there is COINTELPRO. We can't be ignorant of the fact that this is a powerful entity. What we are doing, we are the only real counter to the corporate establishment and to their narrative. They want to tear that down because they want to control things. That gets into Matt Taibbi and the censorship industrial complex. We've talked about all these things on How Do We Miss That with I've seen Savvy interviewing Matt, doing a brilliant job talking to Matt about getting persecuted by Congress, having the IRS show up at his house, having Elon Musk so mad that he shuts off links to Substack. Holy crap. Still.
Yeah.
So we're fighting a huge battle, man. And we have to do it together. Like, there are definitely issues that will brawl over. But I think that if we can come together on certain issues, like on press freedom, I don't agree with libertarians on most things, but when it comes to cannabis legalization and press freedom and a couple other things, I'll work with them and I'll invite them to show up at a Free Assange rally. I'll invite them to show up at an the guys who run antiwar.com, they're anti-war. So let's do anti-war stuff together.
Of course.
We can talk about the other stuff and I'll work on you on the other side. Maybe you'll bring me to your side. And when we get to healthcare, we'll fight and we'll go, okay, we agree to disagree on that side. But guess what? We're not controlling that system right now anyway. Let's work on what we can. Let's do it together.
Of course.
Kumbaya. I am a big kumbaya guy, which is why I put a network together.
Of course. And that's why it's as big as it is too. And that's the lovely part about it. Many different perspectives. And so as far as perspectives is concerned, this brings me to my final question. As far as policy is concerned, because as a friend of mine, Afeni, has always said, policy is her love language. So it is my love language as well regarding politics. What would be your top 3 executive orders if you were president of the United States?
You know, you sent me this morning and I gave it a lot of thought and I kind of reacted right away. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? I'm pretty sure that would be my answer. So my first answer is going to be that I would immediately eliminate student debt, because as president, you could do that with literally the signature of a pen. That would immediately ease the burden on so many Americans. You know, the next thing is, and I know that we've talked about this, we've been Medicare for All advocates. My man showed up and he was on the cover of the Orlando Sentinel on July 25th, 2021, JB, for being at the March for Medicare for All and showing up in Orlando. It would be enacting 1881A and giving everyone in the country Medicare for All. Okay, as president, I could potentially do that. And nobody really wants to talk about that. I would certainly do it right now for the people in East Palestine. I would do it for the people in Lahaina in Maui. These people are going to need a lot more than just health care. Let's ease that burden, because that's what we do for our country. All right. The third thing is, and this is more personal, and it probably would, there's a lot of other things that we could do, but let's free all the political prisoners. Mumia also, not just Julian Assange, because I recognize that there's a lot more political prisoners than Julian Assange, though that's the case that radicalized me and woke me up to all the persecution. But Daniel Hale, okay, Leonard Peltier, who's been in jail basically almost my whole life and your whole life for nonsense. They still won't let him out. I that would be the third thing that I would do, is sign an executive order to let all, and I'd bring Edward Snowden home. I'd bring my INN sister Tara Reid home.
Yeah. Don't forget about Asada Shakur, right?
Can't forget. Look, I don't want to. No, I said bring them all home. Free them all.
Yeah, bring them all home. That's also a really good point, because the thing is that a lot of times, uh, people will ask, well, shouldn't the government not, go after their political enemies and prosecute their political enemies? That's really a sign of fascism. And as we've seen, it is both the sign of fascism in both of the parties, what I like to call the Demo Republican Party. And
Mm-hmm.
so, as we've seen over the last few years, we've seen how they will go after anyone that shines a light on the corporate dictators, really their masters, and shows what they have done in order to have a stranglehold on the country. And so I think that's a really good, thoughtful answer from you. And I just want to thank you for that, because I think a lot of people don't think about people like that as much, especially within the independent media space, or some do, but there's others that really omit that out of the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. And, one of the I'm just a big believer in giving people a shot, especially that are small, that have something to say, that are coming from a unique background, that isn't bringing a perspective to our space right now. That's one of the reasons why we elevate, and we're working with Angel, and I love Angel doing a show. Angel had just done a couple of pre-recorded videos, and we're like, I gotta have him in this. That, like, he's got fire. I've seen this guy on Twitter. I know that what he's got to say, and that he can bring it. And it's just elevating guys like that, and Chris Legion, and bringing people like Rob Durden and Misty together now. Misty being part of INN, and Tara was a co-founder. There's so many amazing people around, and not just within INN. We've got Yeti and Snow Himbo and Big Mad Crab, who's in the chat. Love you, Big Mad Crab, who does all our thumbnails, and Jesse Jett. I mean, we cover a tremendous range of people, of backgrounds, of economic situations, of between parents and single, and age ranges, where we are in life. It's been so rewarding to be a part of, and I think it's still just beginning, and it's a lot of fun to do. I literally do this 7 days a week. It makes my wife crazy. I will tell you that right now. She yells at me and says, "How come you do this all day, every day? Another stream tonight, really? Another thing tonight, really?" Yes, really, because this is important stuff, and not enough people are doing it. So if you have a voice, if you have the ability to do this, put it out there. Get off the sidelines. Do this, please. There are people that are out there that are willing to help. Start a Substack. Write on Substack. JB does that. I love what JB does on Substack. I'm so proud of you for doing that. Although Substack's starting to get infiltrated with some shit libs there too. Look, we have to counter that. We have to counter that and be the anti-imperialist, and be the loud voices that say, hey, look, there's other people. I just wrote an article about how Substack is starting to get taken over and amplify corporate media voices that failed on CNN, and here they come to Substack, because Substack's a cool place that we've built up as independents, anti-corporate, and they're celebrating it. It's like, guys, what are we doing? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So you got a couple stories you want to cover, right?
Of course, we're going to be getting into that really quick. And I just wanted to thank you for jumping into your story and how it's developed over time. That really means a lot. And I'm glad to be able to get to know you a little bit better, and allow my audience to get to know you and the rest of INN just a little bit better, so that they can also tune in to you. And by the way, just to let everybody know, the link tree for Indie News Network is also in the description as well. And actually, let me share it also in the chat, just in case some of you guys do not have it, so that you guys are well aware and up to date, and you guys can catch some of these shows, especially, ones like How Did We Miss That, and other shows on INN, so that you're abreast of some things that you may not catch on independent media as easily. So thank you so very much. It's in the chat as well. So one of the
also
things
INN.net. So sorry, INN.network is the network one. The one that you put in there is for my stuff that I do with Substack and everything else. But INN is the network one. INN.network. You can find everyone there, and all the channels. So the other shows that we do are like, Nobody Wants to Work Anymore. I do that with the Snow Himbo because I've been looking for a job. So how do we showcase that all the crap that you have to go through in looking for a job, and actually he just got one. So just find out the shows over there.